My name is Heather Lewis. I work in the International Department at Sault College, and I'm very happy today to welcome you to this webinar, which is being hosted by Elizabeth Long and Zia Sumar from Long Migoji Immigration Law Firm. They are based in Toronto, but have been able to join us from wherever you're joining us from via Zoom. So we are very grateful for their guidance today, and I will pass it on to Elizabeth and Zia.
Thank you so much, Heather. Welcome, everyone. Our presentation will be about how you guys can get immigration, permanent residence, but also about your status as temporary students and workers as well. All right. So today we're going to be talking about how you can maintain your status on your study permit, how to work legally while you are studying, and what to do afterwards when you're going to apply for your work permit. And then we're going to be talking about permanent residence as well, and how you might qualify for permanent residence. So before we get to the permanent residence, there are a couple of things that I really like you to understand before. And the first one is called implied status. When you have temporary status as an international student or worker or visitor, there's going to be an end date to the validity period. So you'll see that on your study permit, okay? Now, if when you are in Canada, you apply to extend your status before the validity date. Let's say my study permit expires on May 31st, but I want to continue to study. So if I apply just before it expires, as long as I submit my application before the date that expires, the immigration website, they counsel you to apply 30 days before, but that's a recommendation, that's not the law. The law is that as long as you submit it before it expires, even on the day that it expires, okay, then you have implied status. You can continue along with your status until a decision is made on your study permit. So let's say I applied on May 30th, and my study permit expires on May 31st, and I don't get a decision until August 31st, okay? I can continue to study and work on the scheduled break, if there was a scheduled break, until maybe I get my new study permit on August 31st, okay? That's called implied status. Now, what happens if, I forget? Oh, shoot. June 1st, I look at my study permit and, oh no, my study permit has already expired. What can I do then? Well, in order to, I don't necessarily have to leave, but I am out of status then. I can apply for restoration of status within 90 days of losing status. But that's not the same as my implied status, because if I applied just the day before, while I was still in status, I can continue on my status. That's the implied status. But if I apply afterwards, then I have lost my status. I don't have to leave, but I don't have student status anymore. So I cannot work or study legally until a decision is made. So that whole summer, I can't work, I can't study until hopefully they give me back my status. They restore my status on August 31st. Okay, so one of the first things you must understand and you must do is look at when your status expires and make sure that if you want to continue to be in Canada, you apply to extend your status before the status ends. Now, The other concept I wanted you guys to understand is the difference between working in a high-skilled versus low-skilled position, okay? This is very different from essential work. The government has traditionally favored high-skilled work versus low-skilled work. I myself, my own convictions are that I don't necessarily believe that high-skilled work is more important than low-skilled work, but under the permanent residence schemes and the categories, and you'll see when we get to permanent residence, that it is they make very big difference between high-skilled and low-skilled work. So what is high-skilled? What is low-skilled? The government has a system called the National Occupation Codes, classification codes, the NOC codes, okay? And NOC codes. And they have divided all of the occupations that they can think of into 5 different categories. O, A, and B are high-skilled, C and D are low-skilled. And in order for someone to immigrate, for the most part, there are some now with low-skilled, but the majority of permanent residence paths are high-skilled. So you have to figure out whether or not the work that you're going to do in Canada and the work that you've done before in Canada is high-skilled or low-skilled. All right, so what's high-skilled, what's low-skilled? Let's play a little game, okay? I call it my high-low game. Now, I can't really, I'm going to be talking to myself, but I know that you guys are out there. You guys are thinking. Okay, so let's say, I'm going to say an occupation, and you're going to think, okay, is this high-skilled or low-skilled? And let's see how many you guys get right, okay? Let's take an office situation. A receptionist, that's low-skilled. A secretary, and that's high-skilled. A data entry clerk, that's low-skilled. A bookkeeper, that's high-skilled. Accounting clerk, that's low-skilled. Medical assistant, high-skilled. Dental assistant, low-skilled. Okay? I don't know how many you guys have gotten right, but from my experience, when I do this with other at other seminars and webinars, it seems like most people get at least 1 or 2 wrong. Okay, the reason why I play this game is because I want you guys to understand that it is not altogether clear oftentimes what's high skilled and what is low skilled, but it is very important for you guys to know that the occupations that you guys are, the work that you guys are doing or have done, whether or not they're high skilled or low skilled. So I'm going to now talk about the conditions for you to study and work on your study permit. First of all, in order to maintain your student status, you have to actively pursue your studies, okay? Just because your study permit may be valid for 3 years, 4 years, 2 years, you know, however long it is, does not mean that as long as you're here in Canada before it expires, you're okay, okay? A student's study permit expires if you don't go to school, if you're not a student, okay, a part-time or full-time student, you lose it within 90 days, okay? Now, there are 2 exceptions to the rule for you to attend class. So scheduled breaks, some of you may have summer breaks, right? Those are scheduled breaks that are on the school's calendar. Then that is fine. You can go and it's still considered actively pursuing studies. The other thing is sometimes people have exceptional circumstances. Maybe, for example, you have a medical issue, or you need, so your family has some issues, or you can't do something because you have COVID. Who knows, right? So in those circumstances, you can ask your school for authorized leave up to 150 days. And if your school grants you that, then that period of time that you're still considered actively pursuing studies, and that's on an authorized leave. Now, for scheduled breaks, you can work full-time, but authorized leave, you cannot work at all. You cannot work full-time, you cannot work part-time. Okay. The second thing is, like I said before, you have to maintain your status. Now, people are saying, well, it's COVID, what can we do? You can absolutely apply online still. They are still being processed. So submit your application online, and you will have implied status, if you do it properly. Now, when I say do it properly, it means that immigration is going to look at whether or not you have submitted your forms and you have submitted the fee. Okay, the proper forms and the proper fee have to be paid in order for it to be considered properly submitted. Okay, and of course you have to press that button to make sure that it's submitted online. If you do not have some other if you do not have other documents, for example, biometrics, the centers are closed right now. You can't submit biometrics if you need to. Medicals, police certificates, passports, etc. If you have any of those issues, you can write it down in the in your application. I mean, things like medicals and biometrics, immigration already knows. And so usually they give you 30 days to get your biometrics. Right now, they're giving you 90 days. They've already extended it, okay? So don't worry if you can't get those things yet. You just submit your application. You're still required to submit your application, even if you can't get all of those other documents. So let's talk about working while you're studying. This is one of the most confusing things for students right before COVID, and even more so during COVID. You can work while you are a full-time student, okay? It's full-time, normally not part-time, okay? Except in the last semester, so you can work on 20 hours outside of the campus while you are studying on a full-time basis. In the last semester, you can work full-time if you are only a part-time student. Okay, so the whole thing is you can only work full-time. You can only work if you're a full-time student, but in the last semester, the immigration sometimes knows that, oh, some students, they only have one more course, 2 more courses to do, and they understand that. And so if you're a part-time student in the last semester, you can work full-time, okay? Once you have completed your studies, you are no longer a student. So this is something that is quite confusing for a lot of students. They think, oh, well, I've completed my studies, but I'm still a student, right? I've received notice, but I'm still a student. No, you're not. You're not considered a student anymore. You cannot work full-time. You cannot work part-time when you are no longer a student. So when you complete your studies, and you'll get that by the first indication, okay, that you have completed your studies. Either your grades are out, or you get a letter from the school, okay, whichever comes first. That means you've completed your program, you are no longer a student, you have to stop working. Now, there are a couple ways you can start working again. First of all, if you are going to be taking another program, so you've completed one program, And then you're going to be taking another program within 150 days. Okay, so basically that's a maximum of 1 semester in between your programs, right? 150 days. Then you can work in between the programs. So you have to finish your program, you have been accepted to another program, and you're going to attend that other program, then you can work in between. During COVID-19, immigration has come out with a policy that if some of your classes are canceled because of COVID, then you can work part-time off campus. Okay, so remember when I said you're a full-time student, but if you're a full-time student and some of your classes are canceled, then you can work part-time. It's not a scheduled break, so you cannot work full-time, but you can work part-time. Okay, the exception is you can work full-time now while you're a full-time student if you're working in essential services during COVID times. Okay, so let's move on to talk about how to apply for your postgrad work permit. Now, the first question I want you guys to ask yourself is, should I apply for a postgrad work permit? Of course, the postgrad work permit is a golden ticket for immigration. Why do I say it's a golden ticket? It's because there are very, very few other work permits that you can get where you get an open work permit that easily, okay? And it's a golden ticket, but you only get one in your lifetime. So you have to be very strategic in deciding when to apply for your postgrad work permit. The length of your postgrad work permit coincides with the length of your program if it is between 8 months and 2 years. So for example, if my program is a year, then I will only get a work permit for 1 year. But if it is 2 years, then you get a work permit for 3 years. It's much more worth it. Not only is it much more worth it, many of you may need that time of the 3 years in order to get your work experience to qualify for permanent residence. Okay, not everybody needs it. It depends on each individual circumstance. Okay, some people are fine with just a 1-year postgrad work permit. Other people really need that 3 years. So what can you do if you're already in a 1-year program? Well, if you're in a 1-year program, you can do another 1-year program as long as you finish the second 1-year program within 2 years of completing the first 1-year program. And those two can be combined where you can get a 3-year work permit at the end. Okay, so that is something that you should consider when you graduate. Just because you qualify for a postgrad work permit doesn't necessarily mean that you should apply for the postgrad work permit right away, because you only get one in your lifetime. So we have been getting a lot of people coming to us where their work permits have been denied because the officer has decided that they have not maintained their full-time status at school during each semester of the program. Okay, the final semester there is an exception, but for the other semesters you're supposed to be a full-time student. Now, this is very, very key. Immigration didn't used to be so strict, but recently they have really cracked down on this issue. There may be some exceptions to the rule, but it depends on the officer. For the most part, you should do whatever you can to maintain your full-time status at school. Sometimes I have people coming to me and saying, you know what, Elizabeth, this semester, I'm just not able to do a full-time. I have health issues, or I have money issues. I just can't do it. Okay. What you could do is you can try to get an authorized leave from the school to just take that semester off. Okay, if you take that semester off with an authorized leave, you still can get your postgrad work permit afterwards. But if you just do a part-time status, then very well at the end, you may not be able to get your postgrad work permit. Of course, sometimes immigration, they may be able to be forgiving during certain circumstances, but that's on an individual case-by-case basis where they will analyze these kind of situations. Distance education also becomes a big question during this time when a lot of your classes are online because of COVID, right? So distance education is normally disqualifies you from the postgrad work permit if the total amount is over 50% of the program. Now, immigration has tweeted. Don't you just hate it when people think that they should announce policies by tweeting? Like, as a lawyer, that really bugs me, okay? But they had tweeted that students shouldn't worry about going to online courses due to COVID. However, then on their website, they had said that you still have to, it's okay as long as the total amount is under 50%. Well, what happens if it's over 50%? That we are not certain about yet. If your program is going to be over 50% for the online courses, it's better that you are going to school than you lose your student status. But we may have to plead a special case for you later on down the road. Okay. You can work full-time once you apply for your postgrad work permit, if your study permit is still valid and it's within 90 days of the completion of your program. So remember how I said when you complete your program, you have to stop working, okay? You can start working again if you apply for your postgrad work permits. Now, the work permits nowadays are taking around 4 months or even longer to get, okay? But if you apply, as long as you properly have submitted your application and your study permit is still valid and you apply within 90 days of the completion of your program, you can start working full-time until you get the work permit. Now, you can go on the IRCC website and they say you can apply for your postgrad work permit within 180 days. So why is that I have said 90 days here? It's because in order to work, you have to have applied when you have status, student status, okay? And remember what I said in the slide before? You lose your status within 90 days of the completion of your program. So if you waited until 170 days to apply, your application A would be denied because you didn't have status when you applied for the postgrad work permit, unless you applied for restoration of status, and you wouldn't be able to work while you're waiting for your work permit. So just keep in mind this rule, okay? Apply for your postgrad work permit when your study permit is still valid and within 90 days. So you're looking at whichever comes first, okay? So another thing to keep in mind, why that previous rule is now even more important is because previously, if you wanted a work permit, you could have quickly gone to the border and received your work permit then. You didn't have to wait 4 months, 5 months for your work permit by applying online, okay? But now during COVID times, you're not allowed to go to the border anymore. They're going to turn you back. So you have to apply online, but make sure you're doing so properly and within the proper timeline. All right. Now I'm going to move on to permanent residence. The first category that I like to speak about is the express entry category. Many of you may have heard about this already because it's one of the more well-known programs for permanent residents in Canada. So quickly, to qualify for this, you have to first create an online profile, and you qualify through 3 different categories: the Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, or the Federal Skilled Trades class. Once you qualify, you can enter the express entry pool. Okay, so your profile is in the express entry pool, and you will get a score based on your background and whether or not you have provincial nomination. It's called the CRS score, the Comprehensive Ranking System. Just because you've entered the pool, however, does not mean that you have actually applied. You have not applied yet, okay? You cannot apply until you receive an invitation to apply. How do you receive the invitation to apply? Well, every 2 weeks or so, the government will issue a draw where they will announce a number. If your number is above that number, then you can receive an invitation to apply. If it is not above that number, then you remain in the pool, okay? So I'm going to first talk about how to get into the pool. Now, normally speaking, the government has issued invitations for all 3 different categories. So it doesn't matter which category you qualified for, as long as you're in the pool, you can get an invitation to apply. But recently, during COVID times, they have narrowed it down to specific categories, okay? So for the first category, the Federal Skilled Worker category, right now during COVID times, they are not issuing these invitations. That may change once the travel ban is over. The travel ban right now is set for June 30th, but it may be extended, who knows, okay? So in order to qualify for the Federal Skilled Worker class, you don't actually have to have connections to Canada. I have many clients who qualify and get their permanent residence through express entry who have never even come to Canada before. So to qualify for the Federal Skilled Worker class, you have to have work experience in one occupation that is continuous, that is high skilled, and that is full-time. Okay, so let's break that down. You need to be full-time, which means 30 hours a week. Okay, the total hours is 1,560. If you were working part-time for 2 years, okay, you can count those hours together to meet that 1 year full-time. So 1 year full-time, high-skilled, we talked about what high-skilled means. Knock O, A, and B, okay? And it has to be continuous, so no breaks in between and in one occupation. So if you have that work experience, you also have to pass a language exam. It's the IELTS of 6.0 and then self-pivot 7. Okay, and then we kind of do a scoring for skilled worker class. It's not the express entry score, it's the skilled worker class score. And we need to do a score, and you have to pass the 67 mark. And then we also have to see whether or not you have financial savings as well. For a single person, you're looking at around 13,000. For as you add additional family members, we're looking at a couple thousand for each person. So that's the Federal Skilled Worker class. Like I said, many of you may already qualify. And it's not such a bad idea if you qualify to put yourself in the pool depending on your points, even though they're not selecting you now, once the travel ban is over, they will likely return to selecting for this category as well. Okay. The second one becomes even more important during COVID times because this is the one that they are targeting. Canadian Experience Class means the work experience that you have gained is after you have completed your studies. So, or you're not a full-time student. Some of you may I think you're just starting school, right? So you say, well, this is going to be a long way off. But if you have spouses who have work permits in Canada, then they can gain this work experience right away because they're not full-time students, okay? So to qualify under this class, you need work experience in Canada when you're not a full-time student that is high-skilled, 1 year full-time, 1,560 hours within the past 3 years of application, and you are employed. Let's break that down. 1 year within 3 years. Remember, I didn't say anything about continuity. You don't have to be continuous. I also didn't say anything about it needing to be in one occupation. It can be in different occupations as long as it's high-skilled. But what's very important is that it has to be when you are an employee. So in order to be an employee in Canada and not a contractor, one of the important documents that the immigration officer looks at is your tax documents. So as an employee, you should be receiving a T4 slip for your taxes, okay? That's normally issued in February of each year. And on your pay stubs, you should have your income tax, your CPP-EI deducted. That's what being an employee is normally documented in Canada. To also qualify, you need to pass your language exams. I, however, find that the language exams in this is less important than the language exam results for your points, because just because you pass the minimum language requirements here, it doesn't mean that you can actually, just because you can get into the pool, it doesn't mean that you can actually get out of the pool, okay? There's a third category called skilled trades. This is for people who have work experience in the trades category. We're looking at construction, cooks, chefs, okay? And you need to have a LMIA or provincial certification. Most students will qualify, even if you're in the trades, under the Canadian Experience Class. The only reason why skilled trades becomes important is for people who may not have really high points elsewise, but even if they have 200 points, 200 something points, 300 something points, every year the government may have a draw. Normally it's been 2 times a year where they have issued a special draw just for people in the skilled trades. And most of those times, the points have been much lower. Okay, so let's say you're in the pool. Well, I have 4 people in the pool right now. I have Juan, Anna, Jing, and Trupti, okay? And let's say the draw, I think it was 452 last time. If there's a draw for 452, who gets out? Well, Trupti does. Okay, well, what happens though if Trupti only qualifies under the skilled worker class? She doesn't have the Canadian experience. Well, in that case, then she doesn't get an invitation to apply. Okay, so essentially you have to, people ask me, how come the points are going up? How come the points are going down? It's because the government issues invitations to a set number that they have in mind. Normally it's around 3,000 or so, 3,000, 4,000 people that they want to invite to apply. So they're going to take whoever's in the pool at the top, okay? The points had been, prior to COVID, at the 470s because they hadn't included skilled workers. And Canada's become very popular right now to apply for permanent residence. But recently, the points have come quite fast, dropping during COVID times because skilled workers, federal skilled worker class is not being invited, and people who have the Canadian experience class are being invited. Okay. All right, so let's talk about how you can qualify, not just qualify, how you can get your points for your score for express entry. First thing that they look at is age. I like to say when it comes to your 30th birthday, it's no longer a happy birthday. And that's because your points are going down 5 to 6 points when you're 30s. In your 40s, it goes down fast slide 10, 11 points. Now, by your 45th birthday, the good news is it doesn't go down anymore. The bad news is that you get 0 points. Okay, so compared to someone in their 20s who would get 110 points, depending on if they're married or if they have a common law or married spouse with them or not, to someone in their 40s who would get barely any points. Okay, that makes a big difference. Not a lot you can do about age except to apply early when you're younger. Education is very important. If you have 2 degrees or more, where one of those degrees is a 3-year program or more, then your points really jumps. Language is very important. If you have we're looking at, there's a certain level where the language points jump. So reading, writing, and speaking at 7 and 8 and listening is when the points really jump. Okay, if you don't have Canadian experience and you need to be at the 470s, for example, you really need to have that level of language in order to have a chance. If you do have Canadian experience, it's much better. And the Canadian experience that I'm talking about is the same Canadian experience that I spoke of at about the Canadian experience class. So it's the Canadian experience that you gain when you're not a full-time student, that's legal, that's employed, high-skilled, etc. Okay. The foreign work experience, you can get up to 50 points. It's this experience, it is combined with other things like language and Canadian experience for the points, but depending on whether or not you can prove you have high-skilled work experience outside of Canada, you can gain up to 50 points. Spouse's education, language, Canadian work experience, that's what counts for a spouse. So if you have a super spouse where they have a higher level of education, their language is good, or they have Canadian experience, they do need to show that in order to get more points. If you have provincial nomination, and this is only express entry linked programs, we're going to be talking more about this in the next slide for Ontario. If you have that, then you can gain 600 points. So 600 plus whatever score you have, you're going to be able to get an invitation to apply. Your previous study in Canada, so if you finished your program at Sault College, you would be able to get 15 points for 1 to 2 year program, 30 points for 3-year program. Arranged employment. A lot of students think, oh, if I get a job offer, I have arranged employment. No, it's only for people who have employer-specific work permits or LMIAs. If you have your post-grad work permit, you have a job offer, you don't get the points for this. people often say, well, then I can just ask my employer to do an LMIA for me. It's not that simple. An LMIA is something where an employer has to advertise and show they cannot find a Canadian who's able and willing to do the job. Most of the time, A, the employers don't like to do that, and B, a lot of times they can't show that. If you don't have really specialized skills, and if there are other Canadians who are able and willing to apply for those jobs, then the LMIA may not be issued. If you have siblings who are Canadians or permanent resident in Canada, you get 15 points. And if you can speak fluent French, that is a very big plus, okay? Trade certification, people get confused. Oh, can I get trade certification if I have, I'm an interior designer? No. Trade certification is very specific. It's mostly for the construction trades and for cooks or chefs. You're looking at the provincial designations like Red Seal designations. Okay, so I'm going to talk about express entry linked provincial nominee programs for Ontario. Provincial nominee programs are programs where the province has designed programs where they want to nominate people for permanent residence. So immigration is federal jurisdiction. The federal government is responsible for immigration, but the federal government has made an agreement with every province to allow each province to determine who they would like to get permanent residence. And Ontario has a lot of different categories, and we're going to talk in detail about these categories. But one of the streams that they talk about is the express entry. So in order to get 600 points for express entry, you have with the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program called the OINP, Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, okay? It has to be one of these streams. It can't be some other non-express entry stream. So how Ontario works is first, you have to be in the express entry pool, okay? Now I'm too old for this, but I think that there's an app called Bumble, right, for dating, right? Where the guy cannot contact the woman. It has to be the woman contacting the guy, okay? Similar to this, all right? So you cannot just apply to OINP for this stream. You have to be in the pool, and then if they like you, then they send you what's called an expression of interest. Okay, so there are 3 different categories where they may send you an expression of interest. The first one is called the human capital stream. This is one that we're not sure who is going to be selected. In fact, we have meetings with OINP program designers, and we ask them, who are you looking to select? And they say, well, we're not sure. We're still thinking about it, okay? Now, one of the categories has been defined. It's the tech draws. So they just had a tech draw yesterday, and it's for people who have work experience in one of the tech occupations, and you're in the pool, and you indicate you want to live in Ontario. I think the draw was for 420 something. So if you're in the pool with 420 something, you have that background, then they will send you an expression of interest. They should send you an expression of interest to invite you to apply with them for 600 more points. Other times they have also issued expression of interest under this category for people who have job offers, or they have other occupations that they feel is in demand in Ontario, okay? In order to qualify for this, you must have a bachelor's degree or higher. It can be from outside of Canada or inside Canada, but it has to be a bachelor's degree. Second one is called skilled trades. So this is one where you have 1 year of work experience in Ontario in one of the specified trades. So construction, chefs, not cooks, okay, and bakers are some of the trades. Now this has to be gained after you graduate. And if you have 1 year of work experience in Ontario, in the 2 years, within 2 years of applying, then you can qualify for this. The third one is French speaking. So if you have a bachelor's degree and you have a level of French of 7 in French and 6 in English. So 7 in French is similar to the IELTS of the 6.0 in IELTS. Okay, so if IELTS is for English, you need that same level for French. If you do, then you can also receive an expression of interest as well. So that is all I'm going to say about express entry. Phew. I think some of you are thinking, well, okay, this is pretty good. I think express entry will be a good choice for me. Other people may think, oh my God, I just passed my whatever birthday, or my English is not that great. How am I going to get through? Okay. Now I'm going to talk about some alternatives to express entry. So the first one is, this one is an employer-based category. You have to have a job offer that qualifies, okay? If your employer is inside the Toronto area, they have to have a gross income of $1 million, 5 full-time Canadian PR employees, be in business for 3 years. If your employer is outside of the GTA, okay, of course, the Soo is outside of GTA, okay? Your gross income is $500,000. You have to have 3 full-time Canadian PR employees and be in business for 3 years. They have to offer you a job that is full-time and permanent. So that's the first employer requirement. Now, after that, there are 3 categories. The first one is the international student category, and that's going to be probably the easier one for you guys to apply for. You have to apply within 2 years of graduation of a 2-year program or a 1-year postgraduate program. So for those of you who are thinking of doing 1+1 program, make sure your second program is a post-grad program, okay? It has to be at a public university of college. Of course, Sault College is one of those. Okay, now the thing I like to say about the international student class is recently it has become very, very popular because the express entry points are so high. This one, it does not require you to do any language exams. It doesn't look at your work experience. You don't have to have any work experience. You can just apply straight out of school as long as you have that job offer. Because of this, the government, because they only have a limited amount of people who can apply under this program. This year, it went a little bit nuts. It used to be open for months at a time. This year, in February, when they opened it, it just closed very, very fast within, an hour or so, because there were so many people who were applying for this. It remains to be seen whether or not this may be open, because a lot of people who apply, they may not have qualified, okay? So that's one of the things about this category. The second one is for the skilled worker category, what I call skilled worker. It's called foreign worker category, but it's for, again, workers who are skilled, okay? So the job offer has to be high skilled. International student has to be high skilled, but it meets entry level wage. So the salary is much lower than for this foreign worker one. It has to meet median wage. And for this one, you have to have 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years in the occupation. So the first one, you don't have to have any work experience, but you have to graduate. The second one, you don't need to have graduated, but you must have the work experience. This may work though if you have spouses who they haven't graduated, but they are working. Okay, and the work experience does not have to be in Canada. It can be outside of Canada as well, as long as it's within 5 years when you apply. The third category is the in-demand. Now, this is a low-skilled, what's called a low-skilled category, but it is very important for a lot of things in the essential services. So it has to be one of the work experience you have to have is 9 months of work experience in one of the listed occupations. So the listed occupations, there's a whole list of them. There are farm workers, construction laborers, there are, I think, meat plant workers, truck drivers, etc. Okay, so you can see a lot of those are essential services, right? So if you have 9 months of work experience in Ontario and you have that job offer, then you can qualify under this category. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the RNIP. Now this is one, it's not for all people. I don't do this presentation for all my schools, but for Sault Ste. Marie, it is a participating community. So if you guys are going to Sault College, you are lucky to be able to access this program. In order to qualify for this program, you have to either have 1 year of work experience, qualifying work experience, or if you don't have any work experience, if you graduated from a 2-year program within the community, excuse me. And the second thing is you have to have the job offer, in the community, but it should be on the occupations list. So the city of Sault Ste. Marie does have a list of occupations that they are really looking for, and then you have to score 70 points on their evaluation. Okay, and if you do and you have that job offer, then you meet the language benchmark. For the most part, if you guys can get into Sault College, you should be able to meet it. Okay, and you have to have some settlement funds, or you're working in Canada in the community. Okay, so if you are able to do that, then we could apply for you under the RNIP. Finally, this is for people in the healthcare programs, or maybe you have a spouse who also wants to work there. For people who have at least 2 years of full-time work experience caring for children, elderly, or a disabled person in their home. So this experience has to be when you finish graduating, okay? And if you have a 1-year post-secondary education credential, and you meet the language benchmark of 5, then you can qualify for permanent residence under this. Now, you have to be very strategic on doing this. The caregiver program, the occupation under this is deemed to be low skilled. So if you're going to be working for someone, you're going to be applying only under this program. Otherwise, because you won't qualify with the Canadian Experience class as a caregiver. Okay, so normally what we have to do is we need to do an assessment, and you need to make some decisions on which route to go. All right, so I've talked a lot, and I have a final slide I really want to summarize to do with you. What are you going to do now? Okay, the first thing is you have to have a plan. Immigration is one of the areas of law that it's not reactive, it's proactive. Okay, so basically the people who are most successful in in immigration is people who have that plan. They know exactly how they're going to get immigration, because you can see to get permanent residence, it's not for everyone. It's very, very specific on what you need to do. Okay, so you have to have a plan on what you yourself need to do to get to your immigration goals. And then once you have that, then you start getting there. Some of the important things you need to think about is IELTS and CELPIP, right? For maybe your French exam, TEF, right? Make sure that you are practicing for these exams. Even if English is your first language or French is your first language, a lot of people whose only language is English or French can't pass the exams because they have not studied. The exams are often testing your ability to do the exams. Okay, so make sure you understand. There are practice exams available online that you can do at home. Okay, make sure you know and you prepare for these exams. The study programs, right? What do you need to do in order to get there? A lot of people make the mistake that they think, oh, in order to get immigration, I have to work in a area that is related to my program of study. That is not true. You don't have to do that. However, some areas of work are very much in demand in Canada, and they will need you to have a certain amount of training, right? You also have to think about, are you able to get a 3-year work permit or a 1-year work permit at the end? Which one is it? Okay? And so that's the third point. Make sure you have enough time on your work permit to get the Canadian experience, especially now during COVID, when you know that there's going to be a significant time period when it could be very difficult because a lot of the businesses are closed, okay? 3, make sure you stay in status. If you don't stay in status, you could very well lose out on your opportunity to get to be in Canada, get permanent residence, okay? That's why one of my first things I told you guys is about implied status. If your application is rejected, you must contact a lawyer right away. Do not sit around hoping things will change, okay? There is very strict periods of time when you can go to appeal. It's called a judicial review of your application at the federal court. If your application is made in Canada, it's only 15 days from the date of rejection, okay? Also, some people say, oh, I'm just gonna call the call center, immigration, right? It's kind of like, people think that immigration is kind of like a company. You just call them and complain and things will get better. No. Immigration is not there to take complaints and make things better. Immigration is not on your side. This is the government, okay? And the government, I'm sad to say, does not really care about people who are not their citizens or permanent residents, because you guys don't vote, okay? They are there to judge. And the call centers, first of all, if you call them 3 times, they may give you 3 different answers. And they're not there to necessarily help you get your application to be approved, okay? They may say, oftentimes they'll say, go and write a letter. Go and write a letter and explain your situation, okay? If you write a letter, it is considered a reconsideration, an application for reconsideration of your application. And immigration, and if that is rejected, you come to me and say, Elizabeth, can you help me? If I'm going to write another proper legal submissions, it's considered another reconsideration application, and immigration may very well say to me, no, you don't get a second kick at the can. You already had your chance, okay? Finally, you may have lost your status and you need to file a restoration of status, okay? If you don't file things properly within the right period of time, then you may lose your status, okay? So this is our contact information. We do have a COVID-19 update page where we try to update on important information during COVID times. We also do post on our social media regularly. If you like to schedule a consultation to go over your own personal circumstances, you can email us at inquiries@lmlawgroup.com, and please let us know that you have attended the seminar, because then we do offer you a discounted rate for doing so. Okay, so Zia, are you there?
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey, Zia. All right, so I see that we have had some questions.
Yes, we've gotten some great questions.
Mhm.
First, Elizabeth, can you go through, so you talked about the Federal Skilled Trades Program,
Yes.
and you talked about needing a certification or a labor market impact assessment as part of the eligibility requirements. Can you expand a little bit more on what that certification is?
Right. So the certification is a provincial certification for those trades. It's not for all occupations. It's only for those in the trades that are listed under the skilled trades. They're listed, and it's mostly construction trades, cooks, chefs, okay? And these are, in Ontario, it's certified by the Ontario College of Trades. Mostly you're looking at Red Seal designations, etc. Okay.
So if someone wanted to learn more about it, they would go through to the College of Trades, the Red Seal?
Yeah, Ontario College of Trades, you can see how you might do that. They're probably, to be honest, we receive very few people who have those certifications. There may be other ways that are easier. Because normally with the certification, you do need to have a certain amount of years of experience in those trades.
Fantastic. Okay. The next question I have is with regards to students, when they're finishing up their program, can you review when they can work, when they need to stop working?
Sure, yes. So let's go from when you finished your exams. So you go to your exams, right? When you're in school, attending classes, normal, you can work part-time. When you finish your exams, you can work part-time until you get your grades. Once you get your grades or any indication by your school that you've completed your program, you're no longer a student, stop working, period. No full-time, no part-time, stop working. Then you can start working again on a full-time basis if you've submitted your application for your work permit, your post-grad work permit. You submit that application and you have to submit it. The timeline I'm giving you to put in your mind is when your study permit is valid and within 90 days of the first notification that you had when you completed your studies. You apply within that time, and then you can start working right away. You don't have to wait for your work permit. You can start working right away, full-time.
Fantastic. Now, what about if you are in between two programs?
Yes, that's right. So if you have completed your program and you're going to start a new program, that new program is going to start within 150 days, then you can work in between the programs.
And that's still if you're on implied status or if you have a valid study permit at the time.
That is correct. That is correct. But you do have to have some sort of status.
Perfect. And then when you were talking about the skilled worker program, or when you were looking at the different express entry programs, you mentioned that skilled worker might be beneficial for some students who have already received or already completed work experience before starting their programs here. Can you elaborate on how someone would know whether they can use that work experience or not?
So I went through some of the details of the work experience that qualifies for the skilled worker class, 1 year of high skilled full-time work experience in one occupation that is continuous. Did I miss anything?
For the past 10 years.
Okay, but we do need to evaluate someone as to whether or not you have a good chance through express entry, whether you qualify and can get the points for express entry. So that's more of an individual question that we normally need to do a consultation on. But the basic elements of that 1 year work experience as requirement is what I had just said.
Perfect. And then, is it possible to extend the postgrad work permit given the situation with COVID? If students are not able to find that work that they need right now.
So please do not think that the immigration cares, okay? That's a harsh reality. Immigration does not care. And for a lot of people, they've said, well, we can't find jobs right now under postgrad. So do you think they can give us another postgrad? No, I don't think of that at all. In fact, immigrations, the government of Canada, their interest is to protect Canadian jobs. And you will see with a lot of the policies that the first thing is to protect Canadian jobs. So if Canadians can't find the jobs, don't think that you're going to get more leeway to find jobs. The immigration has not at all indicated that they will extend the postgrad work permits at all. So that is why if you're only able to get a 1 year postgrad work permit, you need to do some planning. You need to see whether or not that is going to be enough. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for your time and for your information and for being able to answer some questions along the way too.
Okay, well, it was a pleasure to be here as always. Thank you guys all for joining us. Stay safe and stay healthy, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.